Good evening. I'm Jenny Volin-Katz. I'm the Executive Director of the John Howard Association. Thank you for joining our first virtual event. I'm thrilled you could join us. While I miss not being able to see everyone in person, I know you'll find this year's annual meeting interesting, and you may also find it even easier to attend from the comfort of your own home and perhaps dressed in your pajamas. I'd like to recognize and thank our Platinum sponsors, Rick Artwick, the Bloom Family Charitable Foundation, Project 111, and Paul and Sarah Jane Titterton and the GATX Corporation, as well as two generous donors who wish to remain anonymous. It is impossible to find someplace where the impact of COVID-19 is as deadly and difficult as it is in our prisons and jails. Unable to social distance, inadequate PPE, lack of access to hand sanitizer and hygiene products make carceral environments among the most dangerous and painful places one can be during the pandemic. And if that isn't enough, the impact to daily life is similarly horrible. No visits with family and loved ones, fewer phone calls, video visits plagued with tech issues, lack of programming, extremely limited access to fresh air in the outdoors, and the list goes on. And COVID is not the only issue of an emergent nature in or out of prisons. As the outside world faces a long overdue reckoning of racial justice in this country, our criminal justice system, which was built on systemic and pervasive racism, must confront and change the reality of how and why people in this country are punished, which is largely based on the color of their skin. Our work at JHA not only remains important, as sightlines and access to prisons close, the work of finding out what is happening inside prisons is critical. For almost 120 years, JHA has been going into the Illinois prisons to monitor the conditions of confinement and talk to the people who are incarcerated in order to bring their voices and experiences out to the public and into reform efforts. JHA will continue to fight for increased transparency, for people in prison to be treated with dignity and respect, and for our prisons to be just and humane. Here's a video that shares more about who we are and what we do. The John Howard Association has always been based on the principle that no closed system should be left to police itself.
Carceral spaces are very opaque. You can't see inside, even though people from the communities go inside, and then we lose track. We don't know what's going on in there. And the John Howard Association, they've been a stalwart in causing juvenile justice and criminal justice reforms in the state of Illinois that's brought us out of sort of the dark ages and has started to head us toward more informed, more research-based and evidence-based practices that make everybody safer.
What makes us really different is that we spend a lot of time going into prisons. That part of our mission, that part of our mandate is to be inside the prison so that we can see for ourselves. We spend a lot of time learning about things that people outside of prison don't know about, because we understand that unless we know that, we can't really be on the front lines of change.
Prison is really a highly stressful place due to the isolation. When you don't have an organization to be a watchdog group over a prison, is like leaving the wolf in charge of the hen house, right? The way to lift our morale is following up with us and interacting with us, and therefore we can pass word to guys who are also struggling with issues and say, well, look, this organization actually worked. They helped me through this process. So that goes a big way.
We come in and we keep coming in, and we listen to people when they talk, and we hear their concerns, and we respond to those concerns. And it is those concerns, it is those issues that fuel our day-to-day work.
I mean, it's the transparency, it's the shining the light that brings the hope.
And now we'll hear from the First Lady of Illinois, M.K. Pritzker.
Good afternoon. I'm so honored to be with you today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Jennifer Volin-Katz and the entire team at the John Howard Association for their important work in ensuring a humane, just, and fair criminal justice system. For almost 120 years, JHA has been monitoring prisons in Illinois to document and learn about the prison experience. This work has led to valuable ideas for improving circumstances and outcomes for the incarcerated population. The voices of those most directly impacted should not be forgotten, nor go unheard. These voices should be at the table. We require their input to meet their needs and better equip them with the tools and resources needed for a successful reentry. Years before becoming First Lady of Illinois, I had the opportunity to visit Cook County Jail to learn more about the experiences of men and women impacted by the justice system. During that visit, I met 3 generations of women, incarcerated, all from the same family. It was a heartbreaking and dark reminder of the generational inequities and the impact of the criminal justice system. I carry these stories with me every single day. It has been a lifetime commitment of mine to help lift up women and women's issues across all walks of life, especially those disproportionately impacted by the justice system. And in my role as First Lady, I feel a responsibility to use my platform to advance initiatives that support women before, during, and after encounters with the justice system. I have visited every female correctional facility in the state multiple times. In fact, the first thing I did after becoming First Lady was visit Logan Correctional Center. Each visit we plan ends with a round table, and it's during these conversations that I learn the most. Over the past year and a half, I've recognized the need for far greater collaboration, and most importantly, the need to value those with lived experience so that we are able to be responsive to their needs. We must not forget that people in prison are parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and friends. Their dreams and aspirations are no different than yours or mine. We have to work harder to better support returning citizens and ensure that they have a fair chance at successful reentry. That means helping them get an ID, locating safe housing, finding gainful employment, accessing social services and other resources for which they are eligible. Every citizen of Illinois deserves an opportunity to reach their full potential and attain their dreams and live a life of dignity. It is the responsibility for those who are able to work towards this goal. Again, thank you to the John Howard Association for hosting this incredibly important discussion and for allowing me to be part of the conversation. I'm so grateful for your leadership and relentless commitment to those impacted by the justice system. I look forward to being a partner in this mission. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks. And now I'm thrilled to introduce another leader in criminal justice reform efforts here in Illinois, the Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that warm introduction and for the invitation. Your leadership of the John Howard Association is truly inspiring. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the hardworking staff at the John Howard Association, as well as members of your board of directors for your visionary leadership. And to all of the guests taking part in today's event, thank you for your interest, your support, and your activism around criminal justice reform. For a decade, the John Howard Association has been holding this annual event, and each year we get closer and closer to creating a justice system that better reflects our values. In 2017, I was honored as Legislator of the Year and was so inspired by that honor. I hope you know that I have not let up, and I continue to work diligently in pursuit of equal justice under the law for all. An important part of a functioning democracy is that citizens have faith in our government, faith that our institutions are doing the job expected of them in the way that we envision. A key way that citizens can judge if the government is doing its job well is by demanding transparency in order to see and judge for themselves how government is functioning. The John Howard Association is on the front lines carrying out this important citizen responsibility day in and day out, going into prisons to see and hear what is actually happening inside facilities and pushing to increase the amount of information and data that is publicly available. JHA understands the importance of bringing the voices of people in prison into the conversation so that their views, experiences, and thoughts are considered in creating solutions. Being inside prisons allows JHA to bring firsthand information to the public, to policymakers and stakeholders about the treatment of people and conditions inside our prisons, and to advance sensible legislative and administrative initiatives aimed at making meaningful change. JHA not only identifies issues and makes recommendations for needed change, but also continuously monitors the prison system to see if new laws and policies are implemented as intended and actually produce the desired outcomes. As a legislator, I was pleased to partner with JHA to advance policies made in our prisons that are more humane and to address some of the many inequities and inefficiencies evidenced in our system. Now, as Lieutenant Governor, I have visited prisons alongside JHA in order to speak with incarcerated people and to see the reality of life behind prison walls. I realize the importance of including, recognizing, and respecting the voices, stories, and lived experiences of the people who are directly impacted by incarceration. In fact, taken together, my own experiences and the work of JHA and other advocates are the driving force in Governor Pritzker and I leading a plan to transform our juvenile justice system here in Illinois over the next 4 years. We see that it is not only necessary for our state, but it is the right thing to do. We must care for, love, and invest in our youth and their communities. I value JHA's work and your commitment to making our system fairer and more just. People in prison are people first, despite any legal constraints on their liberty. I would like to end by thanking JHA for all the work that you do in shining a light inside an otherwise dark corner of incarceration so that we can all see for ourselves how things actually work and what needs to be done to improve prisons and recognize our shared humanity. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it back over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Stratton. We appreciate your remarks and your ongoing commitment to criminal justice reform. I also want to thank MK Pritzker for speaking with us today and for your work to improve the lives of women impacted by the prison system. This year, the John Howard Association has selected 7 people to honor for their contributions to prison reform. We're so grateful to our many partners and supporters in systems change work. For her leadership and dedication to increase transparency in our prison system and commitment to criminal justice reform, JHA gives our Legislator of the Year Award to Illinois State Senator Jacqueline Collins.
I am humbled by this honor today, and I want to thank the John Howard Association for this recognition. But more importantly, I want to thank you for the incredible work you do in the service of justice. In this time of racial reckoning sweeping the nation, where the evil effects of structural racism have been exposed, we all feel the urgency of now and the call to action and continued advocacy. Even today, some 243 years since your namesake, English humanitarian John Howard launched the prison reform movement, we are still witnessing and experiencing the inhumane and horrific conditions that still plague our correctional system. There can be no criminal justice reform without prison reform. And if we truly believe in the redemption of the lost, reform must seek to restore and rehabilitate the human dignity and self-esteem of the incarcerated. To that end, I enthusiastically welcome the opportunity to join forces with you on this journey for justice, to fight for increased accountability, for transparency, oversight, and true prison and criminal justice reform. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel reminds us, in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. Again, I am eternally grateful for the honor and recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collins, for those inspiring words and for your ongoing commitment and work to change the prison system in Illinois. For their partnership and support of JHA's system survey work and prison reform efforts, JHA is pleased to give the Partner of the Year Award to St. Leonard's Ministries. For her ongoing counsel and commitment to justice reform efforts, both as a lawyer, advocate, and former JHA board member, JHA presents the Changemaker Award to Camille Bennett. For her leadership and dedication to JHA during her recently concluded term as board chair, JHA is pleased to present the Dedication Award with much appreciation to Regenia Stein. This year, JHA had several outstanding and deeply committed volunteers. We would like to recognize 3 of them for their work to further JHA's mission and prison reform. Judy Dansizen for her work as a volunteer prison monitor, Mike Sayre for his work in our prison response unit, and Bailey Pleva for his data management work. I want to thank everybody again for all of their hard work and their support of the work we do at the John Howard Association. I hope you'll check our website in the coming days to see videos of all of our award winners sharing their thoughts on prison reform and why it is they volunteer and partner with the John Howard Association. Next, we'll hear from Arkee Chaney, an artist and cartoonist who's recently released from the Illinois Department of Corrections. We're thrilled for Arkee to share with us some words about how he discovered art, what art means to him, and his experiences inside prison.
When I was in prison and doing art, and to some standards, I wasn't even locked up because I was too busy doing my art. But I want to tell you how I got started in it. It was a dude named Chili, and he was a partner of mine, and he came by my cell. Dudes was drinking hooch, smoking weed, snorting cocaine, and people's walking up and down the gallery asking, "Hey man, let me get some of that wine." And I was sitting in my cell watching this take place. So I went to Chili and I said, "Hey man, I can't go out like this and the way these dudes doing." And he said, "Well, let's go get in the art room." I said, "Okay." So I went in the art room in Stateville, and that's where I got ceramics. Started out in ceramics, then paint. Dr. Burroughs, I don't know if you know Dr. Burroughs, but she gave me some paint brushes. She came to Stateville, gave me paint brushes, and she used to tell me to paint something. I knew how to draw, but I didn't know how to paint. And I would start painting, and I would bring it over to the class, and she'll say, "Ooh, this is really beautiful." I didn't know she was just lying at the time. She was just encouraging me. And I started doing it mostly to please her. And so I learned how to paint like that. But I started doing paintings and ceramics. And I fell in love with ceramics. I felt that I was heard through my work. And the cartoons that I was doing, I was fighting the institution. All my things was geared. But then I would ask some guys to ask, they'll come to me with some cartoons, and but some of them be lying on their cartoons. I tell them I can't do that. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna tell the truth on it so people to know that what's happening. But I just used it. I used it straight up to fight the institution. Like one, for instance, and what was the name of the one I was in? Hill. Yeah, I was in Hill, and they had a bathroom in the mess hall. The toilet stool was stopped up. Water was coming out, feces and other stuff was coming out of the bathroom. They had it locked, but it come from beneath the bathroom. So I did a cartoon about it. They ran it in Stateville Speak. Soon as the institution saw it, they fixed the toilet. So the cartoons was used to fight the institution. There were some other things that they fell right into place after doing some cartoons on it. Because the cartoons talk more than my voice, but I'll be using that for my voice. It'll talk more than guys who was locked up too. Because the peoples didn't want people to know what was taking place. Some of the bad stuff. And some of the stuff they didn't consider it bad. It just so happened that it was taken for so long until they'll take it for granted. And us being in the penitentiary, we looking for something that's wrong anyway. So that's what I do. I use them to fight the institution.
Next up, we'll hear from newly elected board chair, Jawanza Hughes.
My name is Jawanza Hughes, and I'm thrilled to have assumed the role of JHA's board chair and president from Virginia Stein. Virginia, thank you for all that you have done for JHA. Your leadership and your commitment have strengthened the organization. We look forward to continuing to work with you as you lead our nominating committee. I joined the board in 2016 because I believe in the work that we're doing. Our mission centers the humanity and fairness that incarcerated persons deserve, but it's not just about the incarcerated. I know that no one experiences the prison or criminal injustice system alone. Families are shackled to the system together. Picture a small child trying to reach for his father even though they're separated by glass. Picture a teenage girl struggling with her life choices without her parents. Picture me, 30 years ago, the college sophomore driving a long road between Georgia and West Virginia to visit my mother at a federal facility. My family was shackled to the system. You see, before I finished my finance degree at Morehouse and my MBA at Harvard Business School, before working on Wall Street and steering asset management firms, I was just a kid afraid for his mom. When I was 19 years old, my mother was sentenced to 5 years in prison for a crime that she did not commit. My mother, a hard-working social worker who had nothing to do with the crimes that were being laid at her feet, was the most surprised. We had the resources to fight the charges, but after each swing at the system, we braced for the inevitable impact of the daily injustices that were designed to take us out. The cruel criminal justice formula worked against my mother in the same way that it works against others that look like us. Overzealous prosecutorial discretion, an all but one white jury, and a guilty verdict for the black women that refused to submit to the injustice of a plea deal. I struggled in those days. I had to walk away from college and put my hopes on hold as we braced for 3.5 years in federal prison. I didn't fully recognize the layers of trauma at the time, but they were there. But now, after years of hard work, therapy, and my mother's own determination to get her life back, my family can now say we survived. My mother is thriving, and I'm blessed to enjoy life with my beautiful wife Priya and our children Jai and Zara. But I know that is not the ending that many children of incarcerated parents see or families touched by the prison system experience. You see, no one faces the trauma of the criminal justice system alone. Families and communities face it together. It is for this reason that the John Howard Association captured my heart. They recognize the humanity of all people, including those in prison, and ensure that society does not discount those we cannot see behind prison walls. For almost 120 years, JHA has used our monitoring work to shine a light in the dark corners of our prison system in Illinois. This organization allows the voices of thousands of incarcerated individuals to be heard to ensure that decision makers, stakeholders, and the public know what actually happens behind prison walls. This matters more than ever now. COVID-19 has made this a difficult time for all of us, which means that life behind prison walls is worse and more dangerous than it ever was before. Prison health is public health. Finding out what is happening inside our prisons is critical during this crisis. Will you please join me in the battle by donating to JHA Online right now? Your donation will ensure that JHA can continue to monitor Illinois prisons, listen to thousands of incarcerated people, and to advocate for meaningful change. Please donate to support JHA today. Every dollar you donate makes a difference to us. You can make your donation right now on our website and know that your gift will make a difference to thousands of men, women, and youth incarcerated in Illinois and their families. Thank you for your commitment to prison reform and for your support of JHA. And now, I'd like to turn it over to Jenny for our keynote conversation.
I am thrilled to welcome our 3 distinguished panelists this evening, joining me in a conversation about the pandemic in prisons. Our first panelist is Renaldo Hudson. Mr. Hudson is a formerly incarcerated man who walked into IDOC not being able to read or write. He now stands among its most educated and most productive men who've served several decades in prison. Serving 37 years for a crime he openly talks about as the motivation for his change, he now has a 4-year degree in Christian studies and is looking forward to working towards his master's degree.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with everyone. I'm so excited.
Also joining us is Dr. Keesha Middlemass. She's an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at Howard University. She teaches courses in public policy and American politics and conducts research on race, institutions, public policy, and marginalized populations. She focuses specifically on studying prisoner reentry, the politics of punishment, and racial justice. Her book, Convicted and Condemned: The Politics and Policies of Prisoner Reentry, is an interdisciplinary and multi-layered examination of prisoner reentry. Currently, Professor Middlemass is studying food insecurity in the returning prison population.
Great to be here with you tonight.
And our third panelist, Mr. Rick Raemisch, has decades of experience working in numerous areas of the criminal justice system. He was the executive director of the Colorado Department of Corrections, during which time he received several awards for his public service and exceptional work in prison reform, including the changes he implemented in Colorado, successfully changing and significantly limiting the use of restrictive housing while also improving institutional safety. Rick is recognized as a leader on prison reform and is highly sought after to participate as a subject matter expert on both the national and international level. Prior to joining the Colorado Department of Corrections, Rick worked in several capacities in the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, taking over as the head of that department in 2007. He has held numerous positions in the criminal justice system, including as an elected sheriff and undercover narcotics detective, and has served as an assistant district attorney in Dane County, Wisconsin, and as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Western District of Wisconsin.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome, Renaldo, Keesha, and Rick. I'm so thrilled to have you here for this conversation. So to get started, in talking about the pandemic in prisons, I wanted to start with you, Renaldo. You were in the Illinois Department of Corrections. You're only recently out of the Illinois Department of Corrections, so you were in there during the pandemic, and you were released during the pandemic. And I'd love to hear about your experiences, specifically, getting ready to leave and leaving during this time, what it was like inside and what kind of preparation you were able to undertake before leaving.
Well, it was a very scary experience, I have to confess. We have a warden in this facility that I left by the name of Kimberly Larson, who was very hands-on on providing us with sanitation, equipment, from hand sanitizer and bleach to clean up, and masks. But one of the things that make it scary is that after the wardens leave, you have to deal with those that are, the everyday frontline workers, if you will, the staff. And they had a very hard disposition in regards to believing that it's actually a serious pandemic and that people can actually die from being exposed to someone that's affected. And so that process was really scary. And being in a locked environment where you have no voice in who you are around or choice in who you're actually around, because they can move your cellmate or someone else into your cell in an instance. So we're not single celled in that facility. And so that's really scary. On the other hand, when I walked out of prison, there was nothing in place to be tested. I was not actually tested for COVID-19. I had to go and get a test on my own upon my release. And I think it's crucially important that people recognize that something as simple as testing us before we leave can, relieve a lot of anxiety and stress.
So Keesha, as someone who studies prisoner reentry, how does it look different now during the pandemic? What is happening? What's not happening? What needs to be happening? What are you seeing that's different?
Those are all great questions, Jenny. And I think the important part we have to think about is that when individuals are reentering, they have to, or they should be eligible to be tested by the system, either in the prison or by parole officer, and then be able to have a piece of paper to show that they are COVID-19 negative. Because right now there's so many instances where people have to be able to be tested and show they're negative before they're even able to interact in their workplaces. And I think the same should be extended to those that are reentering. What has really changed is how to access services in a time of COVID when so many government offices are closed down or operating on limited time, and then nonprofits that are overwhelmed with individuals that are coming home because of either compassionate release or home confinement release, or just the de-incarceration and trying to decrease the prison population, that a lot of times there's not a lot of communication between the institution, the individual that is returning and their family, and then also the lack of communication between government and the nonprofit sector.
So Rick, from your perspective as someone who's coming at it from correctional experience, what is it that corrections should be doing, needs to be doing in order to safely release people and really be doing it successfully? And by successfully, I mean so they're able to, leave and not come back.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. First of all, the solution is simple, really. It's the same precautions that are being enacted outside need to be done inside. Unfortunately, the road to do that seems to be somewhat difficult for a number of states. And when I say the same precautions, it's already been mentioned somewhat, which is we need social distancing, you need testing, you need masks, you need sanitizers, you need cleaning supplies, and you need the ability to quarantine and proper medical care. And of course, prisons, as most of us know, are bacteria factories. I've mentioned in the past that the difference between European prison systems and American systems are that in Europe, they invest in corrections. In America, we invest in efficiency and not all that well. And when I say efficiency, I mean that most American prisons are built to pack as many people under one roof as they possibly can. And now we've got this incredible crisis going on where there's not enough space. And so the answer, and I'm a firm believer in the concept of never waste a crisis, we all talk about mass incarceration in the United States. And now here's an opportunity to start to address that, because unless the court sentence you to death, you shouldn't be facing a death penalty by going to prison because of a virus that aren't taking proper precautions to be able to keep people safe. And so what should be done is the safe release of those that can be released back into the community. A quick example are in many states, there are hundreds of individuals eligible for parole, and that parole has been tabled because they haven't gone through particular programs that they're never going to get to begin with, because they're at the end of the line and they're never going to get to the front of the line. And there's all kinds of instances like that. And so I think states really need to look at early release. And when I say safe, I mean those nonviolent individuals, those that are elderly, those that have health issues. Safe for the community, but also safe for the person being released, meaning that you can't just release them. They need to have a place to go, and they need to have, as we talked about before, proper medical and health care and a job and place to stay.
Yeah. That's an excellent point, Rick. And I think that in Illinois, along with most other states, we're disappointed that release wasn't as prevalent as we had hoped, agreeing that, really the best way to minimize contagion and exposure and increase safety was to decrease the prison population. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of ways in which that can be done safely. But since that didn't happen, we've had to focus more of our time on what are the policies being put in place during COVID, and specifically, how are those policies that are on paper translating into practice in the facilities? And Renaldo, you are on the front lines experiencing that, and I'd love to hear, what that looks like in Illinois right now.
It's really difficult. Like, you have people like the chief of staff of corrections here, Camilla Lindsay, that's hands-on, and trying to get things done. but then things don't always come down the pipe as it should. Things can translate in the director's office one way, but then on the ground is something total different. And so it's difficult because people don't communicate well enough. You be like, well, what is the actual policy in regards to the movement, in regards to like handling of trades? Like there's so many areas within a correctional facility that people have to understand. It's like an island of itself, and it's a lot of different from healthcare to the mental health to the commissary, and all these different spaces have to be governed by some policy. But when different people feel they can practice a different policy from what's actually designed to keep people safe.
Yeah, and Renaldo, what you point out is really something that's a problem every day. But of course, during the pandemic, where people's health and safety are even more at risk than they usually are, it presents a much greater challenge. And Rick, I'm interested in your perspective on how that challenge, might be better met.
Well, the states that have been most successful in my experience are those where the staff has actually formed somewhat of a partnership with those that are incarcerated. And I mean, people have to realize everybody is scared, and if they're not, they should be. And so that includes both staff and offenders and everybody's families. And so those that work together, that take this on as, we're going to do this together, we're going to keep each other safe, we're going to work together to find solutions to stay healthy, instead of this, as Renaldo talked about, this line drawn. I think that line needs to be blurred under these particular circumstances. And some policies, frankly, just need to be ignored right now. One is, of course, some states and counties, they refuse to give sanitizers out because there's an alcohol base in them, and they're afraid that alcohol to consume is going to be made. And you just got to kind of put that thought aside and just tell yourself, well, are there going to be a few instances of that being done? Or are you not going to provide the sanitizer and have a number of people die? That's not that difficult a question to answer to yourself. So it's things like that. And it's, people need to realize too that everybody has bosses. And so politics is in play here, policies, law, statutes. A lot of the directors, they've been, not a lot, the ones that I know have all been working on this 7 days a week for months now, and doing everything that they can within their ability. And I define that as their ability, because some they're not allowed to release, even if they want to. They're not allowed to give certain items out. As Renaldo said, it's got to, you really have to watch the staff. You have to ensure that they're following the rules as far as masks and testing. And remember now, these prisons, a good number of them in every state, aren't placed where they should be placed. They're placed where a particular legislator or lobbyist had the most power to put a prison in a rural area to supply jobs to that area. And the point of that is that in the small communities, there really isn't the type of healthcare facilities that are available on a large scale in case there's something like this that comes up. That's one concern. The other is that this virus only gets into prison one way, and that's by staff, because everything's been shut down now for months. And so the staff that is infected takes this back, infects other staff, and then they unknowingly take it back into this community through their families, and you have these terrible problems. And so everybody really needs to work together on this to get solutions. But really, we all know what should be done, and that's social distancing and wearing masks. And so when you look at taking a gymnasium, and because you're overcrowded, turning that into a dormitory. When I say dormitory, it means you can reach over and touch the bunk next to you because there's hundreds of them in there, and packing people in. That's got to stop. There's better solutions. There's electronic monitoring. There's kiosks. There's all kinds of things that can be done where people can be safely released into the community.
Well, speaking about that, two things come to mind, and Keesha, I'm interested in your view on this. We talk, I think that the health and safety of people in prison is something that has been covered in the news, that people are starting to understand. We may not be getting the solutions and the responses we'd like to see, but I think there's an awareness that congregant living situations pose a much greater health risk, and that prisons really are, the ultimate in congregant living. But one of the things that's not quite as commonly discussed is the impact on other areas of life for someone who's incarcerated. What this means in terms of being locked down, lack of privileges, lack of programming, opportunity, and notably communications, right? No visits with families and loved ones, lack of phone calls. Where there are video visits allowed, often there's technological difficulties that make those experiences very frustrating. And, so not only is that a difficult thing to live through while one is incarcerated, I'm guessing that has ramifications on reentry as well. And Keesha, I'm interested to know, sort of what does this mean from that perspective?
Right. And it's really important to think about the way some states have responded to COVID. And there's currently 12 states, some with the largest incarcerated population: California, Texas, Louisiana, Arizona, Arkansas. But they've suspended all visitations, including legal visits. And so the legal visits are looking on a case-to-case basis. So we're talking about constitutional rights being violated under the Sixth Amendment and access to their attorneys. But also the visits are suspended with family. And most states now have suspended regular visits, which means that those individuals that are incarcerated don't even get to see their families and loved ones. And only recently have restrictions been uplifted to allow visitations, but on a really limited basis. And why visitations are important is that it keeps the individual who's incarcerated connected with family. And although not everybody that's incarcerated is going to have a supportive family when they re-enter, those that do, family provides the stability for an individual to re-enter. Everything from weather appropriate clothes, teaching them how to use a cell phone, housing, food, and all those things that are required when someone re-enters, and they tend to have little to nothing. And so when visitations are cut off, that also means then a lot of other ways of communication are cut off, because phone calls are expensive, but also with the use of administrative or medical quarantine, which is the equivalent of lockdown, and using different language to refer to lockdowns, those that are incarcerated now even have limited access to phone calls. And so we're really cutting individuals off. So when and if they are released, oftentimes their loved ones get 24 or 48-hour notice, if that, and then it's a scramble to receive their loved one home.
Yeah. Renaldo, can you tell us a little bit about what that feels like, what that looks like, what that experience is like from the other side?
Yes, it can be really, really emotionally difficult. Just to give you a quick example, I worked as the chaplain clerk in Danville Correctional Center. And so one of the departments that is just completely essential to the mental and social well-being of the prison is the chapel area, where all the different religious groups are able to congregate and actually communicate their faiths and their beliefs and the things that they're struggling with, and get daily or weekly encouragement to make it through the week. That has been every volunteer, every, assistant chaplain, volunteers, all the schools, all of those things has been shut down. And so the people who used to be able to consult a volunteer and share, who don't have family, but they have the extended family through a volunteer, and that has been removed. When you talk about the fact of there's no visitations, the visiting room used to really be a place where people that didn't even get visits got encouraged by seeing other people get visits. and would even talk to people like, hey man, you had a good visit. That was your mom. And it affects the wing, it affects the atmosphere of the prison for people to say, man, I got hope through seeing that somebody came and loved you. And I want to make sure that I share with people, for all of my peers, the thousands of men and women that are locked up that will never be heard. I do want to make sure I share with people like, listen, we may have made bad decisions, but we at least deserve to be treated humanely. And that's what I love about the John Howard Association, and that you're giving voice to us, because people need to know that change can come, but it's difficult, and it's hard, but if we trust the process, I think we can make it. And I just want to make sure that I share that, that I think people are trying to do the right thing, but I think people are also frightened on both sides.
Renaldo, a lot of what you say raises another point that we haven't gotten to yet, and that you don't hear people talking about all that much, which is around transparency. We don't really know what's going on in our prisons on a good day. The pandemic is really among the worst of days, and it's critically important that we know what's going on, that we hear from people like you in real time, and that's not a possibility right now. And Rick, I'm wondering from your vantage point, what is it that we can do to increase that transparency, to get better information and lines of sight into our prisons?
It's not necessarily what you can do, it's what corrections should be doing, in my mind. And what they should be doing is being very transparent about what's occurring within their department. And by being transparent, I mean reporting to both staff and those incarcerated what the numbers are, the number of deaths, what precautions are being taken, what precautions they can take, what staff is doing, what those incarcerated should be doing, what's available to them, how to use the tools that are available to them, and reporting out, if not daily, which would probably be too much, but certainly weekly, and showing both the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's going on within these institutions. And I truly believe the more transparent you are, the better understanding everybody has of the problem. And Renaldo somewhat touched on this, but if you present a problem to those that are on the ground, both staff and those who are incarcerated, there's a real good possibility they're going to come up with some great solutions. And you've got to give them the ability to come up with those solutions.
Yeah. Keesha, I see you nodding also.
Hey, can I add?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just want to quickly, I'm sorry, Keisha, I just want to quickly say, because it's important what he just said, is it's so easy to lose sight of how we have to communicate with each other, and when you're down on the ground, something as simple as, just to give you a quick story, there was an issue about commissary because we're locked down. And so that's where you get your soap, your toothpaste, your toilet paper. And the mere fact of someone being agitated by being told, because everyone is locked down and because we have to practice social distancing, staff has to pass out commissary. And staff in this one instance took the position is, that's not in my pay grade. I don't have to do that. And so it created a tension between the inmates who were struggling with, man, I just want some toilet paper. I just want some toothpaste. I just want my soap. But the union, in its strength, to say, well, listen, staff is paid to do the following, and they shouldn't have to pass these guys out commissary. And that was, to me, that was a simple issue of humanity. That was an issue of, I understand, listen, that you are paid all this money to count me, and so I'm standing here, you can see me, and so you can count me. But all you have to do is just hand me a bag, I sign my name, and you leave. But because of the indifference, that exists on the ground, and because of the power of different agencies, I think unions are important. I think people's rights need to be protected. But I think in situations like this, like in the pandemic, well, those are the type of things that have to be pushed to the sideline and say, listen, all hands on deck. Let's work to make sure everyone is emotionally and physically safe. And security is not just tactic, it's also practicing civility, also practicing transparency.
So I want to sort of end with this last question. Unfortunately, the pandemic hasn't ended and doesn't appear to be ending anytime soon. That I think what we thought back in March and April was going to be temporary is unfortunately becoming a much more long-term way of life for all of us. And Rick, I'm wondering what that means. You know, how do we handle this better inside our prisons, understanding that this isn't going away, that this is something we're going to have to live with for a while?
Well, you know, great question. What needs to be done, and everybody I think is doing this now, is trying to redefine what the new normal is going to be. And that's what needs to be done in corrections. A good example of that is we talked about lockdown, which is kind of a temporary solution to everything within prison systems. Something happens, lock everybody down and let's figure it out. Well, we haven't figured this out yet. And as you say, you know, all of us thought, well, this is going to be here for a little while and then it's going to be gone and everything's going to be back to normal. Well, it's not going to be back to normal ever. And so it's time to start looking at how are we going to continue programming? How are we going to continue education? How are we going to continue treatment? How are we going to continue all the things we did in the past but have to do differently now, but have to keep those going? I can't imagine being locked down in a cell for this period of time with all programming stopped, and not even having the ability in some states to have a tablet. And so when you look at what is available through technology now, all these things you can be up and running. You know, there's virtual reality devices that people can wear that do all the reentry things that Keesha was talking about. Everything from loading a washer and dryer to using a cell phone to filling out a resume to opening a bank account. That's all available now. Tablets where you can have any type of programming, emails, they can be used as phones. And, you know, the big concern, of course, is, oh boy, they're going to be using these phones all the time. And we have these troubles with smuggled cell phones. Well, the research that I've seen shows that the majority of those that have cell phones smuggled into them are not to continue criminal activity. It's to talk to their loved ones. Isn't that what we want them to do anyway? I mean, isn't that part of it? So there's video conferencing, there's video visitation, there's all these things that have to be looked at and have to be enacted to get as back to normal as we possibly can.
Yeah. And Renaldo, give us your perceptions on that, your perspective rather.
He's like, he was my cellie. Like, Rick, I don't know, like if you ever did time, but you're so right. Because I know so many people who, you know, were trying to communicate with their families, and the system is so, so adversarial that, you know, the basic things that you need, they just won't give you. And so the human nature, it has nothing to do with people simply wanting to continue to be criminal, but people want to be aware and conscious and talk to their loved ones. And so, for example, you have guys that are in segregation that during the pandemic, they can't talk to anyone because they don't have the privilege to get on the phone. Then you have people that have the right that don't have access. And so it's so important that people begin to understand simple things. Like they sell the tablets. Like I personally am not a fan of GTL because I think they're really treating the Illinois prisoners really, really bad. The tablets are just too expensive. And people, family and loved ones are paying for that stuff. So I think that the Department of Correction can take them things out and just issue them and put programs, software, because like you just said, Rick, they have software where they can do emotional intelligence, anger management, substance abuse, that's right there on the tablet. And so I think those are the type of things that have to be put before the director so that he can say, okay, we need to get this software into the inmate population, or even the access of basic phone on the tablet. If I could actually phone my people from my tablet, I don't have to stand in a line waiting for someone else. You know, we only have 20 minutes out of the cell, and it's a limited amount of people that can be out for these 6 phones, but you got 10 people out with 20-minute time periods. And so one of the things that I would really ask everyone to consider, which is an STD: stop, think, and decide. We all need to wear our masks. We all need to practice social distance. Stop, think, and decide if you want to be the person to infect people or you want to be the person that keep people safe. Stop, think, and decide if you want your inmate population to be educated or you want them to walk out of prison illiterate. I just learned something really simple. Just to give you a quick example, I, for the last 37 years, did not have to think about if a refrigerator, when I put something in the refrigerator, if it would spoil or not. I just learned the other day that I have to pay attention to milk because I bought some milk and I didn't know that this milk was spoiled while even in the refrigerator. And so after 4 days, this milk went bad. And so it was a lesson for me that people take for granted that they don't teach us. There's no one, and I was a peer educator, no one told me you need to pay attention to stuff you now have to buy. You need to pay attention to you're now responsible for all of those little things. My little niece just taught me how to use a cell phone. Y'all know I'm on this thing with the Zoom with you all, and I'm like excited because I'm learning the process of communicating in this new world. And I want to be a part of sharing with my peers. Listen, there's a lot of stuff they're not teaching us in the behind those walls. You know, they're not, like I said, they're not testing us coming out the door. Not to throw anyone under the bus, but I think it's important to say to people, Director Jeffries, I respect and honor you, but make it a mandatory policy that every person walking out of prison has to be tested going out the door. They tested me for HIV, right? On the day that I was leaving prison. I have not had sexual intercourse, and I'm not trying to be vulgar, with anyone. But after 37 years, they wanted to know if I was HIV positive. And I, by the grace of God, I was negative, thank God. But I'm saying, why would they test me for HIV and not for coronavirus? Like, that did not make sense to me. And so little things like that, just to bring people into 2020. You know, we're in 2020 and COVID-19 is the main issue. And as everyone said, it's not going away anytime soon. So we have to figure out how do we, you know, as a community, educate and keep people safe.
I think that's right. And while I could keep this conversation going on for hours and hours, and I know the John Howard Association audience well enough to know they'd probably stick with us, I'm being told that the rest of the event awaits. So we're going to have to end there. But I want to thank all of you so much. I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and I really appreciate your participation. And look forward to seeing you guys in person someday and having you back to connect with our John Howard Association network and audience. So be healthy, be well, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone who joined us this evening. One of the few benefits of a virtual event is that we'll be able to share this on our website in the coming days so that you're able to share it with anyone who might be interested in the work of the John Howard Association but wasn't able to tune in tonight. As we look forward to our 120th year, JHA is grateful for your ongoing partnership and support, without which we would not be able to do the essential work of prison monitoring, which is foundational to systems change efforts. I hope everyone stays healthy and well, and I hope to see you in person next year.
you.